One of the very first videos I did on this channel was scrappy Quilt As You Go coasters, and they were super cute. I still use mine, but they were all straight line quilted, which is fine, but we can have some more fun. So we're going to revisit Quilt As You Go, but we're going to do it all with a free motion quilting foot. So grab some scraps and some odds and ends of batting, and let's have some fun.
So to prep, I have a square of fabric. I'm using this aqua, just extra layer cake square that I had laying around. And I also have a square of batting that's just a scrap. Now I have cut this to about 7 inches square. My eventual coaster will be smaller, maybe 4 or 5 inches square, but I want that little bit of extra batting around the edge to hold onto while I'm quilting, and also just so I can trim it down really nicely when it is done. I also have all of my aqua string scraps here to sort through and sew together as I grab them. So first, we are just going to choose a scrap, and I'm going to lay it across my batting and grab some scissors and trim it to size. So now I'm going to grab another strip and lay it down just as a rough measure and cut off the excess. And now we are going to seam these together. I'm aligning these raw edges and I'm going to sew down this line to attach this strip to our coaster. Now I am using the edge of my foot right here as a rough guide to get a straight-ish line here. And I'm just going to hold my thread ends while we get started. And then I am using my hands and sewing this straight line towards and away from me. That's a natural motion to get a pretty straight line. I'm keeping this part of my foot aligned with the edge. Now, your foot may look different and your bar here may be behind your needle, in which case just find a place on the foot of your hopping foot that makes sense to give you a nice consistent reference to make a roughly 1/4 inch seam. So now that we have this seam sewn, we can flip our second strip out, and you can press that or just finger press it down so that it is nice and flat. Now we could have done all of this with the regular foot on our regular machine, but the beauty of this is that we are set up for free motion quilting right now. So now we can go back in and do some free motion quilting designs right now without having to go and change our setup on our machine. We can swap back and forth between this piecing and our free motion quilting. I'm going to go ahead and tack this edge down, and then we are going to fill these 2 strips with free motion quilting. I'm not even going to break my thread here. I'm going to start here and go directly into some free motion quilting. This is a great way to practice designs. It's very low stress. You're working in a small area, so you can try something out. And if you don't like it, you haven't committed to a whole quilt or even a whole block. I have filled this area with swirls. Now remember, I will be trimming this down a little bit, so I am just going to sneak it down the side because this part is going to get cut off anyway. And then I am going to do some different designs in this stripe. So I have reached the end of this. Now we could break thread and start again by attaching our next strip. I'm going to go ahead and sneak it down here so that I don't have to cut my thread. Just going to sew off a tiny bit so that I can place my next strip in there. Now I do not have a ruler foot installed on this machine. This is a pretty flat foot so that I can see the needle really well. But if you do have a ruler foot installed, you could use a ruler to guide your quilting so that this line is really nice and straight. It's a great way to practice your ruler work if you're just getting started,
and kind of in a low pressure situation, since this seam, this line I'm about to stitch, will be on the inside of this coaster, so no one will ever see it. I'm going to go ahead and stitch off and not break my thread, and we can press this back and get it nice and flat and go ahead and quilt it. So you could do this entire coaster without ever breaking thread, just by stitching off into your backing a little bit and accessing this seam. So now I can move back on and quilt this new strip. I've done a little feather here, and we have room for one more strip. When I was quilting this, I stayed about 1/4 of an inch away from the edge because I know that that is going to get covered up with another piece of fabric. I'm going to do my same trick here and cut my piece of fabric and sew it all on without breaking thread. So you can see that there are some wobbles in this seam line. It is not perfectly straight, but when we open it up and press it back, it looks just fine. It looks totally straight, and no one is going to judge you by the insides of your coasters. This strip is overhanging my batting by about 1 inch, so I am going to just trim it down to make my quilting a little bit easier. And now I'm going to just quilt this last little strip. So here is our finished little sample. Now I could finish this as a coaster like I did with the first ones that I made by taking another piece of fabric, sewing it right sides together with this, and then turning it inside out. And then I just finished the edge with a little bit of a top stitch. Or you could make more blocks like this and sew them together, quilt as you go style, for a full quilt. Or you could start with a bigger piece of batting and make a pillow or a placemat or a table runner or anything that you can dream up. This is a really flexible technique and it's a lot of fun. It's a great way to practice your free motion quilting skills without doing a whole quilt, and it's a great way to use up your scraps. Here are some other samples that I finished. This one is in blue, and I used the same technique. And this green one, I actually started in the center here and did more of a log cabin style. I hope you guys enjoyed this take on Quilt As You Go free motion quilting style. It's a great way to practice your designs and come up with something really useful at the end. So until next time, happy quilting!